大名主税務 And welcome to the Record of Sword Forged Worlds, a unofficial Sword World podcast. I am your one and only gaming monk, better known as Mildra, and of course, because it's me, I kind of have to do the whole thing of clap 3 times to bless the stream. Some traditions are eternal like that, but with me, of course, I have the man who argues with himself, good brother Hydra.
Hey, Middle, wake up. It's about to start.
We have our resident sheep, who may or may not have a bit of derangement. Good sister Maki. And the man of 1,000 runes, the CEO of Zadari Enterprises, and the bane of my fucking existence, good brother Xanatrix.
Zadari Enterprises would just like to say that if a sheep can deadlift me, I'm going to deadlift the sheep. We're going to turn into an internal engine, spinning forever in the void. Kind of like when you stick a buttered piece of toast to the back of a cat and drop them.
I was about to bring that up.
On top of that, I would actually like to take this moment to point out that the Japanese above the title is accurate.
Mm-hmm.
Tsurugi ga kitaeta sekai no senki, or the war record of worlds made by swords.
Mm-hmm.
I especially appreciate this detail.
Oh yeah, and eternal thanks to Potato Hedgehog for designing this particular logo, as well as the one for Faded Continuum, and a lot of the logos I use on my streams have been done by him. And of course, good brother John for giving us the splash graphic that you're seeing here. But this is the debut of the newest podcast to enter the broadcasting family of the monastery. And it is something that I've wanted to do for a while. It may not have been in this form, but given recent events, which we will get to, it felt like the right time and place to do so. So, obviously, since this is a brand new thing,
if I may,
do it.
I do kind of appreciate the thematic and philosophical nature of having swords. The weapons be the creator of the world, if I can say.
Oh yeah. Oh. Now, obviously, the first thing to answer is, what is Sword World? Sword World is a Japanese TTRPG that started out in the mid 80s. Was the brainchild of several of the people in Group SNE, which is kind of became the TTRPG division of Kadokawa. They were not only responsible for this, but also a Lodos RPG called Lodos Companion. I'll get to that in a minute, as well as the publishers for the Japanese runs of Shadowrun and Earth Dawn. Although the Shadowrun version is a interesting beast I may get to one of these days, because it took a completely different look. Nah. To the point where it feels like its own setting, since they decided to not set it in Seattle. Honestly, a smart move. And the Japanese version of Earth Dawn had a lot of artwork done by Keita Amamiya, who in the 90s was the guy for monster designs in quite a few different tokusatsu. Especially a lot of Super Sentai ones. I think he was the monster designer as well for... I know he was the monster designer for Gingaman and Time Ranger. Along with a few others. Was also the monster designer for the Imagine in Den-O, and would become a crucial part of the Garo project. Which...
So he's just bangers all around. Got it.
Yeah. He's had his own manga as well, but he's mostly known as a character and monster designer. And am I using this as a roundabout way to say that more people should watch Garo? Yes.
Roundabout? What are you talking about? We all know that you're pandering to you and me.
Yeah. Yes, I will not deny that. But Sword World started out in the mid to late 80s. Went into a bit of hibernation for a few years in the 90s because TTRPGs were losing a lot of ground to TCGs at that time. And then made its comeback with the 2.0 version in celebration of the game's 20th anniversary. And then that would further be refined with the 2.5 version for the 25th anniversary, because there's a lot of love for anniversaries that are multiples of 5. And once you've seen that pattern, you will not unsee it.
I mean, anniversaries at multiples of 5 in Japan are kind of a tradition that goes much further back than broadcast television.
Mm-hmm. I mean, 5 is a very lucky number, as anyone who has ever had to deal with King of Gets will tell you. If anyone listening to this manages to get that joke, you're one of the real ones. But now, as far as I think the next logical step after going through that is, I've given my take on the matter, but Zen, if you wouldn't mind being the evangelist for some of the finer details with Sword World's history. Obviously, we're not going to go granular yet.
Yeah. So, Sword World was, to begin with, a way for Group SNE to get a system going after talks with, at the time, TSR went silent.
Mm-hmm.
They were originally going to be translating Dungeons and Dragons, and they got one book and everything went, well, they got one major book, I should say, and everything went silent.
Mm-hmm.
TSR having their own issues and their own business problems in the West notwithstanding.
Lorraine.
So Group S... I was being generous, Monk. We don't need to think about her. She can't hurt us anymore. But they decided that they were going to take a game that they were already technically playing in D&D and make a system to help support it.
Mm-hmm.
And in so doing, they wanted to make it more accessible to other people as well, which is why they moved from the polyhedral dice to the 2d6 system that is ubiquitous with Sword World. D6s being the easiest dice to get in Japan at the time compared to polyhedral dice. So that is where everything really began. The failure to get D&D into the Japanese market, which allowed other Western RPGs to come in, such as Call of Cthulhu, which is a hugely popular game in Japan from the Western markets.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, using those settings they had, they expanded.
Mm-hmm.
They expanded the world that they were exploring in their games. And also, this then expanded into things like manga and novels, and eventually anime. But that's a very broad strokes view of how Sword World itself started. The brass tacks, the details, might actually be more easily digested and more easily understood watching some of the videos over on Guided by Cardia. No, this is not a sponsored stream. Yes, we are fans of the Guided by Cardia group. Awkward, if you're out there, thank you again. You and your translators have given us fantastic amounts of detail and content for us to play Sword World for years to come.
And when it comes to now,
These translators are insane.
oh yeah, and they've done quite a few books for 2.0, 2.5, and 1.0, and they are continuing to do so even now. There was some translations of replays as well as a travelogue book recently that I may go into detail at some point, though how much detail I can go into, I'm still working that out, because any 2.5 stuff that they translate is under a indefinite embargo for obvious reasons. That being said, I think the next logical step would be to go into our introduction to the concept of Sword World, and I will start before I go with the rest of the people here. So, I had known tangentially about Sword World in one form or another for quite a few years. Mostly because it would be mentioned in passing when there was discussion of Record of Lodos War. Now, some people believe that Lodos led to Sword World. That is not true. That is a very common mistake. I will get into that later. But I especially started hearing about it when I was in a discussion group that was watching the Rune Soldier anime. And some people have erroneously stated Rune Soldier was just a Slayer's wannabe, but in reality, Louis the Rune Soldier is a recurring character that is meant to be this mascot for Sword World 1.0, and has gone through many novels and many worlds.
The Rune novels are huge.
A lot of them are a case of Rune Soldier in this area. is how they tend to go. He is very much a pulp character in that sense. And there was one translation on a fandom wiki that I found at one point, but it was very all over the place, and I had to do a whole lot of cleaning up to make it somewhat readable. And even then, there still wasn't enough to run a campaign with it because updates were very sporadic. Then, by sheer happenstance, I come across the Shout Wiki version of the 2.0 translation that was done by Aquid and their team. And while that one still had its own organizational issues, that led me to getting the PDFs, and the rest was history. And when I relaunched the Cloister, the actual play series I do on Saturdays, it was only a matter of time before I would bring Sword World into that once I had a reliable character sheet on Roll20. And the rest was history, and it also led to one of the more legendary clips on this channel. The one of everybody roasting good brother Akira for being late because he was eating chicken while we were discussing demon waifus. Our resident waifu hunter was late in the discussion about waifus.
He won the Doku challenge for that one.
Of course.
I remember watching that as a viewer when it happened.
Yeah. And I don't go out of my way to pick on people, but sometimes people do things. But that is my background when it comes to Sword World, and it's I do hope at some point down the road, now that we have a beta translation, to maybe stream Sword World SFC at some point.
Could be fun.
I'd say it'll be easier for me to set up that than set up Sword World PC.
Let's emulating PC Engine 98 is a thing.
Yeah, and it also means I'd have to load up DOSBox X, and let's not say we didn't.
Exactly.
But Zen, what about you? How familiar with Sword World were you before I started sending you the PDFs?
I knew Sword World was a game, and I was familiar with the settings due to not only having watched Lodos War, but read some of the Rune Soldier novels, and then looking further into the Forcelia, the world of Forcelia.
Mm-hmm.
I knew there was a different version and a different world, but I didn't have any of the details because you were the one that introduced me to the translated books from Awkward's translation group.
Mm-hmm.
But as a concept of what it was, I understood fairly well. Looked at the Wikipedia entries for it, and then looked at the fan wikis for it, and had a pretty good understanding of a overview vertical slice type thing of how the game could and would be played.
Mm-hmm.
But most of my introduction was definitely Lodos War, all the way back in the 90s.
Did you ever play the Dreamcast game?
Unfortunately, no. I didn't have a Dreamcast, and my one friend who did, we didn't play a lot of other games besides Tech Romancer and Power Stone.
Fair. I do remember some people calling the Dreamcast game just a Diablo wannabe, but since it would take another 15 years for us to get Diablo on consoles, take it.
Well, also, as an unrelated side note, to all of you cowards out there who just heard the words Tech Romancer and thought that it might be a VN game, you're wrong. It is a mecha fighting game. Get it? Play it. It's actually one of the best from that era.
Mm-hmm.
Fuck yourself. Also, if you play Blodia, I'm going to kill you because, trust me, I know Blodia's weaknesses.
But that, Maki, what about you? I know you've talked with me about your adventures when it comes to Sword World, along with the card thing you had shared with me a while back. So, what was your introduction when it came to Sword World?
My school's very own TRPG club. Since I am the only one who's actually from, the source.
Why would you bring up the worst Highlander movie in this?
I was the president of the TRPG club in my school.
From the source, eh?
So I sort of had to research a bunch of TRPGs. Sword World was one of them. I had been sort of on and off playing it for years now.
That certainly fits, and it is amusing that the time-honored tradition of people getting into TTRPGs through some sort of school group endures. And it endures and endures in either official clubs or just general groups, and this is something that goes all the way back to the very early days of tabletop. But lastly, there would be you, Hydra. I know I brought up Sword World with you personally, but were you familiar at all with Sword World before that, or is it thanks to, or am I to blame?
Well, I'd say you're half correct. I definitely saw to the Record of Lord of Sword back when VHS was still a thing. Yes, I'm a boomer. And sometime afterwards, I actually saw the Rune Soldier, like the anime release, also on VHS. But then afterwards, I pretty much had to take a break because someone had to be a productive Hydra in society. It was only when I effectively started dipping my noses into TTRPGs, and more specifically the non-Wizards of the Coast D&Ds, that I discovered about the Sword World.
Mm-hmm.
When I really started getting into it, it was around the time you did your run in a cloister.
Yep. And I will admit that there were certain things that I did during that run that I wish I had certain books translated at the time. Especially ones like Those Who Cross the Abyss, because I feel like some of that abyssal magic would have been really great for Arya.
Mm-hmm.
Although I am proud of the fact that in that particular campaign, we effectively turned what was a nightmare magic knight into the setting version of the Doomslayer.
Yes, I remember when Arya effectively made a dummy mommy her bottom.
But
Arya's good at that. I designed her well.
Mm-hmm. But with that in mind, there's a few things I will note as far as the podcast going forward. Aside from the fact that this is going to be a bi-weekly podcast, the other thing I do wish to note is this is not just going to be covering the most recent edition of Sword World. In this podcast, we'll be giving a fair amount of coverage to the 1.0 era, the 2.0 era, and the 2.5 era. And a big reason to go that broad is the fact that a lot of the things in 2.0 were set-ups from 1.0. Much in the same way that it's also very important to establish a tone and set the stage, the overture and the like.
To be honest about editions when it comes to this game, when it comes to Sword World,
mm-hmm.
everything builds upon itself in a way that is satisfying. We get refinement and redefinition of things into even better versions of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And the additions expand upon the core. So, unlike every edition change of the world's most litigious RPG.
Yeah. There was a lot of refining, but there were significant but the most significant change from 1.0 to 2.0 was both tone and setting. 1.0 takes place in Alecrast. The dominant continent within Alecrast is Forcellia. which is one that's divided into the western regions and the eastern regions, known as the Ten Children. Later on, Lodos would be integrated into these, but that wasn't the original plan. 2.0 takes place in Raxia, and 2.5 as well, just on different continents. With the 2.0 era, you have the Terrassier continent, and in the 2.5 era, you have the Alflame continent.
A name that we still think is stupid, it should just be Alfheim and fuck off with it.
Yep. Now, on the tone end of things, it really comes down to the fact that 1.0 has a very sword and sorcery approach, and I pin a lot of that on the fact that one of the primary people involved with the 1.0 era was still Ryo Mizuno, who has cited Conan the Barbarian as one of his major influences for his particular style.
Nothing wrong with that.
And more specifically, Frazetta's vision of Conan. And while that's not easily seen in some of the art, I can see it very much in the world that he depicts.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
What's kind of amusing though is while a lot of people will bring up that Record of Lodoss War started out as a D&D replay, by the time we get to the novels, and the D&D association is not nearly as direct. Like, just the type of spellcasting that Deedlit uses doesn't really fit the D&D model. And same thing with the rune magic that Slain uses.
Well, that's kind of the point.
Mm-hmm.
I can insert a little bit of trivia and possible hearsay here.
Go ahead.
Since I worked in gaming industry a lot of the time. But the reason why Sword World initially was diverging from the D&D formula was because the designers concluded that following the same format would be too creatively restrictive.
I can see that.
I can see it,
Absolutely.
especially
And
since
they
we're...
already had more or less a plan in terms of what world they wanted to do.
I can see it especially if we're since considering the time frame we're dealing with mid to late 80s, and the only if I recall correctly, the only translated version of D&D in Japan at the time was the Red Box, which is nice, but if you want to do something a little more expansive, that's not going to be nearly enough.
The basics of D&D did not fit that world. So the decision was made to build their own thing from the very start.
I'd imagine that their treatment with their attempt at trying to make Lodoss into a campaign setting didn't exactly endear them. Because while TSR was not willing to play ball for that, they were willing to play ball when they decided to publish Lodoss stuff in its own book and get the lawyers out, because TSR was spending more money on lawyers than they were on game designers.
The name the world's most litigious RPG does not come lightly. They've been the most litigious since the TSR days. You think the litigiousness was WotC? No. No, it was not.
No. WotC just reminded everyone about that litigiousness. And if anything, back then it was even worse.
Yep.
Which was also using a different source of inspiration instead of war games that came from the West. The source of inspiration came from video games instead. And it continued further into the development of Sword World as a whole.
there is some legs to that for a few reasons. One of them is a lot of computer gaming magazines were also servicing TTRPGs. Dragon, I know was. No, not the Dragon, like the one that a lot of people are familiar with. This was a completely different magazine that just happened to be called Dragon. I think it was Dragon Monthly or something like that. And Kadokawa also had their own computer gaming magazine, which was one of the factors that would eventually lead to the creation of Dragon Quest. But everything that I have read and have been told is the wargaming scene never really took off in Japan. And I can understand why, given the amount of space that's needed and space is at a premium, as well as the cost overrun and a lot of the. I feel like one of the big things that helped establish TTRPGs in Japan was replays, and the fact that replays were in the same part on bookshelves as manga and light novels. That is my own speculation, though. Obviously, I wasn't. There's no way that they would have been able to get first-hand knowledge of what the reading habits were in parts of Japan in the
I kind of am
mid-1980s.
offended the replay's tactic was never adopted on the West.
It actually kind of like the problem is that with the way that tabletops were a lot yes, tabletops were quote unquote popular in the West. The same way anything nerdy was quote unquote popular amongst the nerds. The replay tactic probably wouldn't have worked well for a lot of people reading novels at that time.
There's for the longest time there's been a stigma towards fantasy and science fiction novelists. This is a stigma that goes all the way back to I'd say the 1950s.
Yep.
Where science fiction writing and fantasy writing was treated as trashy. And for a lot of people, the only way they could get noticed was in anthology publications like Weird Tales. There's also the fact that the first generation of TTRPG players, yes, were wargamers, but also history nerds. And a lot of history nerds tend to turn up their nose at certain motifs in fantasy fiction, especially the college know-it-all history nerds. I know some may say I wasn't like that. I'm like, you knew some people who were. I've been in those circles. Don't try and weasel your way out of that. And I think that's the reason why it wouldn't have worked. I think if there was a golden opportunity for it to work.
I've also been in these circles, so I have no comments to make here.
Yeah.
It's too true.
I do think that if there was an opportunity to do the replay thing, it would have been in the early 2000s as young adult fiction started to really blow up. The problem was when it did blow up in those early 2000s, D&D was still in a recovery phase, and there was still a lot of uncertainty post TSR bankruptcy. That was only about 5 or so years ago at that time.
I think the big thing there though, Monk, is that while we didn't get the replays concept, because of the explosion in young adult fiction, we still got people drawn into D&D via the novelization of a setting concept. You know, what started with Ed Greenwood and the Forgotten Realms, or Weiss and Hickman and you know, the world of Kryn, expanded and blew up in the early 2000s, especially because it coincided with D&D 3.
Yeah.
But that's a bit of a tangent.
Yeah. Getting back to the heart of the matter. I have seen some argue about whether or not Sword World 1.0 or 2.0 is OSR. I will reiterate what I've said in the past. I vocally dislike the self-proclaimed OSR crowd. I find them everything that I wish to not be, and the argument about whether or not it counts for that. But just by broaching the argument, you've already lost me.
Well, it's also a case of not even wrong, Monk. Like the question they're asking doesn't form to the topic at hand. They don't even know enough to know that the question makes no sense.
Oh yeah.
Asking if any part of Sword World is part of the old school Renaissance is just stupid.
Or if it's compatible with the old school Renaissance, which is the more common question. And
I look at people like that, and I want to quote Tropic Thunder every time.
I don't blame you. Now,
Every time.
Now, as far as what we intend on covering when it comes to this podcast, for the first few episodes, we're going to be focusing on 1.0, because I do want to give a bit of a spotlight to it, especially since with all the news about an official English translation of 2.5, I feel like 1.0 has kind of gotten lost in the shuffle when it does have its merits. And
There's a bit of a spotlight when he's talking about the entire rest of the year.
Yeah. Well, it probably would have been less if I didn't do this, bi-weekly, but we have something else on the other weeks, as you're well aware.
Yes, I know. We've turned Sunday into the weed day, Monk.
Yeah, and
it's the weed day of the weekday.
And it also means that we further immunize ourselves from any sort of blackpilling.
Yes. Just so everybody knows, I've determined that becoming a weeb, it makes you less and less black-pilled over time, because frankly, anime has way too much hope in it. Manga have way too much hope in them. Video games from Japan have way too much hope in them, and we need to encourage Japan to keep that. Oh God, do we need to encourage Japan to keep that?
Yeah. Now,
I saw a scary picture today, Monk.
Yep.
A picture of George Soros in the same room as the mayor of Tokyo.
But that is a whole other thing. We will get to that one of these days. But I do want to address one thing that I kind of hinted at. Now, because of that one video by William SRD that I have had to unfortunately tear to shreds, there has been a narrative that has been cropping up. Two of them, in fact, especially with that announcement a couple months ago. One of them is that Record of Lodoss War led to Sword World. As I mentioned earlier in this broadcast, that is not true. In fact, Lodoss and Sword World were supported at the same time under the Group SNE umbrella. When the initial plans to do a D&D campaign setting for Lodoss didn't pan out, the Lodoss Companion game was made to fill that gap. The central idea was that Sword World and Lodoss Companion would be servicing two different kinds of audience. Lodoss Companion would serve people who had more of a video game background, whereas Sword World was for those who had more of a TTRPG background. Now, when TCGs started to eat everybody's lunch in the late 90s, Lodoss Companion was discontinued, and Lodoss Island was integrated into Alecrast. The mindset being Sword World still had a reasonable following that was drawing in eyes, so let's move it over there. And the other narrative, and this is one that I've seen applied to both that I've seen pundits apply to both Sword World and Juarez Blade, another game that has been covered on this channel.
I backed it. I backed it at $200 for the collector's edition.
Is both games being RPGs that beat D&D in Japan. I find this particular claim, and this is the reason why it took me 9 years to admit to being a journalist, very misleading and disingenuous. Because D&D has had its footprint in Japan, but that footprint is nowhere near as ubiquitous as it is in other countries. Part of that, as mentioned before, is due to how they handled things with Group S&E. Another part of it is the fact that they sat on their hands too long, and by the time AD&D hit Japan, other games had already beaten them to the punch. But another major problem was TSR/Wizards of the Coast was not very consistent in support. They would support it for a few years, and then there would be nothing for a few more years, and then back to supporting it again. And this is over the course of decades. I liken it to when a TV show keeps changing its time slot, and the audience dies a death.
If anything, if we had to compare any other game, we would have to compare Western released game that competed with D&D, which would be the Cole game.
Yep. Call of Cthulhu, the most popular Western RPG in Japan.
Yeah, and...
No. Not Western RPG. Just period. Most popular RPG. In Japan.
Yes, that's also true.
Mm-hmm.
But if we're comparing apples to apples, you have to mention that it is Western, because we're comparing a Western RPG to a Western RPG.
True. But yeah.
So in the process of doing
what I meant to say is, if we had to compare, then it won definitely over D&D.
Oh, absolutely.
Which, I wonder what Peterson thinks about that. Maybe he considers it a abstract
Probably
form of
something like Japanese and their tentacles.
You know, I was trying to avoid that because it was low-hanging fruit. Well, Zan's gone bye-bye. Egon, what do you got?
I am currently beyond the capacity for rational thought.
But no, I'd imagine he finds it a respite from people taking the piss out of him for some of his Doom levels. It's okay. It's okay. Everybody does it. So who the fuck designs a level shaped like a hand?
Who has two thumbs and designed a level shaped like a hand? Peterson.
But I will admit one.
That was a handful.
Damn. I will admit one unfortunate thing when it comes to the 2.0 and 2.5 era is there hasn't been as much support in terms of video games. As far as I was able to find, there was one game on the DS. Whereas in the 1.0 era, you had 2 games on the Super Famicom and 1 on the PC-98. Now, granted, both of them were technically the same story, just varied. It's an adaptation of the Island of the Dead Gods novel. But that's still technically 3 games, as opposed to 1.
He is technically correct. The best kind of correct.
And think part of the reason is just if a lot of people looked at a video game version of Sword World, it would look like any number of console style RPGs. I think would be the issue.
I can see people like if I truly put myself in my most cynical brainwave. So yes, I am being performatively cynical now for examples purposes, Monk.
Mm-hmm.
I can see people saying that with 2.0, that let's say we're over on Alflame. Oh, this is just Tales of the Tales of games, specifically Tales of Cold Steel, because of the railroads.
Yeah, and
to them I say "Thigh on D."
Yeah, and we will get to the railroad thing at some point, since one of the fascinating things when it comes to studying this universe has been that Gestalt fantasy approach that I've mentioned in the past. Even though 1.0 is carrying the DNA of sword and sorcery, I would not say it's a one-to-one parallel to the likes of Conan.
That was just one of his inspirations. That's all it was.
Oh yeah. And I've talked about this in the past, but what I refer to as Gestalt fantasy is those styles of fantasy that are a mixture of multiple genres into a combined whole, but one where the mixtures feels natural instead of a kit bash.
And it ends up being greater than the sum of its parts, as the word Gestalt implies.
Mm-hmm. We ended up writing a whole thing on Gestalt fantasy within our project.
Yep.
I think if there's anything would sell people on Sword World game, it would be the extensive world building, and it being the quadruple post-apocalypse.
That particular
post-apocalypse.
I will note this: the quadruple post-apocalypse is exclusive to the 2.0 era. That wasn't the case with 1.0, and this is the reason why I called it the record of Sword-Forged Worlds.
It only came later.
With Alecrast, the term Sword World refers to the fact that it is taking place after a uprising and essentially a massive slave uprising ended the magic civilization, creating an age of sword. As opposed to the age of an age of magic. Magic wasn't destroyed. It's just that the more decadent
its hold was crumb.
Yeah. I'd liken that civilization period to, say, the Sorcerer Kings in Dark Sun.
I'm not quite sure that Alecrast is that.
It's not that bad.
Yeah, I was gonna. I had once again my real life gaming group has had discussions about perhaps playing in Dark Sun. I'm like, you don't want to do that. You think you do, and maybe we will one day, just so I can hurt you.
Williams says, I would say Gestalt fantasy was the original style until hard sci-fi authors and Lord of the Rings copycats ripped it apart and ghettoized it. I don't see that. Because that ghettoization is not just Lord of the Rings copycats, but rather people. I'd say it goes back to that dismissive approach to fantasy all the way back in the 50s, and dismissive approach to science fiction, because that was a genre that was seen as low grade, cheesy, and camp. Don't get me wrong; it can be all of those things, but it was seen as not a worthwhile genre to pursue for one's writing career. And that was
Yeah.
part of the reason Sturgeon's Law was established, was as a response to that mindset.
90% of everything is crap.
Mhm. It was because people were using these really bad pulp SF novels to make some grand sweeping generalization about the entirety of the genre. And I will also note that idea of ghettoization of genre is far more of a Western thing than an Eastern thing in my experience.
Yes. As we've discussed numerous times on this channel, even in something as simple as Chinese wuxia, the separation between types of fantasy breaks down. Like, the only real separation when it comes to what we consider classical Chinese fantasy is, are they more grounded in doing martial arts, or are they cultivating immortality from the essence of heaven and earth? In which case, you have your wuxia for the martial arts side of things, you have your xianxia, or xianxia for the immortal cultivation, and the two commonly intermix, and the two commonly overlap, and the two even bring in Western elements, which is where you get xuanhuan, which is xianxia, but also has things like spaceships and things, or modern day stuff, or systems.
Mhm.
Lit RPG systems are part of xuanhuan. So that genre thing is just to tell you, here is what this, what some of what might be in this book. Some of what might be in this book.
Mhm.
You have to look at all the genre tags to go, oh, those are most of the major themes. And then you read it and you realize, oh, there aren't enough tags.
Yep.
God, do I run into that every time.
Yeah. But the term... And so it brings up, where do you think that hard sci-fi comes from? They tried to be legit, and pulp fantasy is far better than any Lord of the Rings copycats. I would advise not using the term copycats as cavalierly. It's right up there with the way with the way clone is used, as well as the fact that I generally try to not put a pedestal higher or lower for individual genres. I realize that there is a hipsterism problem within enthusiast discourse, but I try to apply a different culture within my monastery. But getting back to the heart of things. One of the big reasons why I wanted to do this was, aside from doing more material with Sword World, but also showcasing that I honestly think Sword World is a much easier introduction to role-playing than the world's most litigious role-playing game is, in part because it has a defined setting that can be built around, but still has wiggle room to put your own stamp on things.
Yeah, we definitely proved that with our we definitely proved that one, Monk.
Mm-hmm.
With our actual play. Holy moly. We definitely put our stamp on that world.
Yeah. Which is always something I try and shoot for. That's the reason why I like to go from first level to max level, or its equivalent, in campaigns.
Oh yeah, definitely. The biggest thing is that whether you have a setting you can build around, like Sword World, or whether you've made a comprehensive toolbox that requires no setting, cough, Final Fantasy Legend Edition, cough, shameless plug, cough. I'm not even going to try coughing, fuck that.
It is not shameless if you have no shame.
How can you shame that which has no shame? Indeed.
Hashtag not ad.
Hashtag not ad. Well, it can't be an advertisement. We're not making any money. This is a nonprofit. But by having
yes.
those established tools or settings,
The
preferably
final charity tabletop roleplay game.
I'm never going to get through this. But by having your established tools and established settings, or lack thereof, if you've built the tools so that the setting doesn't matter, you create a game that is much more comprehensive and comprehensible. And Sword World is one of those ones that I feel is exceptionally new player friendly.
I know there's the mindset that having an established setting is a restriction, but the problem with the whole, oh, you can use this to run any kind of fantasy, is you end up with analysis paralysis, and thus people end up going with the most generic approaches that they can think of as a safe measure, and then they never get out of that.
Yeah, it's an issue of essentially, by not having anything that is definite, something you can build off of, your foundation, you pick the safest foundation. And picking the safest foundation, while safe, is also sometimes somewhat boring.
What do you mean, somewhat?
I am being generous, Hydra. The Zand chaos meter is at a low boil right now. I'm not trying to blow the top off of the stacks here. I'm not trying to kill everybody with my chaos right now. But safe choices even with safe choices, if you have the proper tools, you can build something exciting. It's just the safe choice makes that foundation want to go in a specific direction. Sword World gives you this and when we say fantastic, I don't mean it as in great, awesome. I mean it as in the original meaning of that adjective, full of fantasy. A fantastic world that is massive in both idea scale and actual scale, and even has tools to make it so that you don't have to even play in that world. Hello, Abyss and Shallow Abysses.
Also, Sword Labyrinths.
Sword Labyrinths, Bubble Worlds. We can keep going, but we'll get there. We'll get there. Half a year, maybe a year from now, but we'll get there. The point being that
Because we all love a little bit of Persona in our fantasy game.
Maki, you're going to cause me to cough up another lung. That'll be my 4th this month. I can't. But yes, we all love a little bit of otherworldly places in our fantasy because
Sorry for my lung gauge.
Oh, it's always fun with you around, Maki. Thank you. But the world that you build on, yes, it has specific ideas. But once you're on those specific ideas, what you do with them, the sky's the limit. You have your parameters. You know your upper and lower bound. A thing we are always talking about when it comes to the guidance issue. But by having your parameters, you then have all the tools they threw inside those parameters and go nuts. Sword World does that, and it does it in such a fun and easy way to understand with varying levels of complexity. I mean, the 3 combat systems alone show that.
Oh, yeah. And you have that, you have the fact that everything's just 2d6s. You You have the approach that classes are taking, where classes are skill packages. In fact, I think in an early translation, they were just called skills.
But those are all things we will get into in detail down the line.
Yeah. Now, some of the things we'll cover are going to be on the mechanic side of things, but we're also going to be covering the lore side of things on both Alecrast and on Alfling, because you do have a variety of regions, and some of the regions have gotten more love than others. We still have we have yet to get a guide on the Cindercast region, for example. But we're also but this also means that things like the various regions, some of the nations within those regions, the movers and shakers in them, as well as some bits of culture, because a few of the setting guides have done things like local cuisine, which is always makes me smile whenever I see an RPG book do that. You also have things like the various pantheons. We're probably going to have to talk about the one race that's shared between both settings, the Grass Runners, as well as the differences between how magic is viewed in the system.
There's a lot of things we're going to have to do, people.
Mm-hmm.
That's what we're getting at.
Yeah. And this also includes going into several of the novels and a few of the manga, because there have been a small handful of Sword World manga, but most of the non-RPG fiction is in novels and light novels, as well as a few short story anthologies.
So, Sword World, to answer Final Fantasy Fan 12, Sword World is still very much tied to its own world. While I said that you could play outside of the established world using the shallow abysses and the bubble worlds and everything else of that nature, it's tied to its own setting still. The setting still has very much established conventions and races. Could you create a space opera out of that? It'd be hard to do it, but you probably could. I can see myself creating a space opera using trains in space. Oh wait, that's just Zeno again. Never mind that. But the game is very much a erring on the side of the type of Gestalt fantasy where things are less space and more terrestrial. That doesn't mean it couldn't be done, just that it would be more difficult to do so.
The amount of work that you'd have to do for it, you're no longer just making a modified version of the rules, you're making a whole other game. And that has been done with the 2d6 approach. At one point there was a Scrapped Princess RPG. But that game is nowhere close to compatible with Sword World 1.0. 2.0 would have been a few years out. It has a more traditional skill system, along with a bunch of other changes that, aside from the 2d6 mechanic, they don't have anything in common. The same thing applies to the Dragon Half RPG, which could be one of the earliest examples of a comedy RPG in Japan, because, it's Dragon Half.
I still have that theme song stuck in my head.
And the same thing applies to the Goblin Slayer RPG. Like something that, if there's one thing that I think a lot of people coming into Japanese tabletop have had to learn very quickly, is that a lot of TTRPGs that were made in Japan are not trying to be that same degree of one size fits all of, oh, you can use this to run an entire genre approach. But
each RPG tends to be its own thing that wants to be its own thing. But within that thing, you can run a lot of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to remain within those boundaries.
Yeah, the boundaries might be wide, but the boundaries are there.
Yep. Like I said, if I was even going to remotely try and space opera in Sword World, it wouldn't really be space opera. It'd be like dimension hopping train opera, which again, that's just Deno, but with more work.
Wouldn't that just be a Leiji Matsumoto RPG?
I'm not channeling the spirit of Leiji Matsumoto, but I don't know what you're talking about, look. I don't know anything about what you're talking about. Run away!
Yeah.
Run away!
yeah, let me just ignore the fact that you've got a gravity saber off in the corner.
Read the script, monk, where the gravity saber goes off. But in all seriousness, doing Common Writer in Sword World would be a lot easier than trying to do a full-on space opera. In fact, we kind of didn't Rick want to try and start out Garo almost as if he were a Toku hero because he had Writer and Grappler and other stuff.
Yeah, he was trying to go for this ex-biker gang kind of character that was very much drawing upon Kanji from Persona 4. Because
with a little bit of Common Writer, and it felt like just a tiny bit.
Which I think if I wasn't doing simplified combat, might have been easier to do, but what we were doing at the time was very much dependent on simplified combat.
Yes. We were trying not to have everything bogged down. That was the other thing.
But and as far plus whenever it comes to the mecha question, there's the issue of what style of mecha you go with. Do you go with Stompy? Do you go with Spiky?
My answer is yes.
Mm-hmm. And well, in that campaign setting I've been kicking around, we have both. It's just that one of them you're not gonna. One of them you could buy if you want to break the bank, and the other one you are not buying.
You cannot buy.
If you have to ask, you can't afford it. But
I was just making a joke on the Rebuild movies titles that we keep doing. You cannot buy.
Yeah. But
in other words, a Disantask of Flone, and not everyone gets a mecha.
Well, you might be able to get one. It's just getting the fancy ones isn't gonna come easy, or at all.
Ain't gonna come cheap neither.
Mm-hmm. But in addition to that, if by some miracle I can have anybody from either the translation team or from the official side of things to visit my monastery, that will be an absolute boon. I'm well aware of the primer. At some point down the road, we may do a deep dive on that, though it will probably not be as part of this. It'll probably be as part of my Valley of the Judged and as a one-off special. But I will note, as mentioned, the next 2 weeks are going to be focused on the 1.0 era. With the exception...
I'll be right back in about 5 minutes.
With the exception of what we're going to be doing in 2 weeks, which is more of going into the history in detail. And I'd also say that I'd like to try and in the process of doing that, I would like to try and construct a Appendix N.
Mm-hmm.
Now, granted, there's going to be a fair bit of cheating because I'm pretty sure 90% of that Appendix N is just going to be other console-style RPGs. Which
there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, and since we do have some new people, I may as well go into that so people don't go, "What the hell is a console-style RPG?"
Okay.
Oh.
Would you like me to do it, or would you like to do it?
Let me set the stage a little bit. I do not like the term JRPG. I didn't like it when I was a little kid. I don't like it as a full-grown monk. I've done a 7-minute video a few years ago as to why I don't like the term. But obviously I'm not going to play that video here, so in lieu of that, I will have San here be the evangelist to give the reasons why and why I use the term console style.
So, the term Japanese RPG is not an organically grown. It was one that was kind of foisted upon the scene by people first just trying to say, hey, these are cool games that came out of Japan, which is slightly misleading considering that there are games that come out of Japan that are RPGs that do not appear as what people consider these days to be a JRPG. Dark Souls is probably the most prominent example. But it is a JRPG by the definition of it was made in Japan. That's the other issue, though. It was made in Japan is not enough to say that this is an RPG of the particular style a person is talking about. It tends to become circular. You ask a person, well, what is a JRPG? They say it's an RPG that comes from Japan. Dark Souls, like, no, it has anime-style graphics. Then you point to Septerracore, and they go, no, it's made in Japan. And round it goes.
Mm-hmm.
The reason...
The chicken and the egg dilemma.
You go. Later on, what made the term even more distasteful is that the Western gaming scene, both indies and larger corporations, used the term JRPG as a pejorative, as an epithet, as a way to cast aspersions upon Japanese games creators. There's a very famous clip of Phil Fish, the failed indie dev, poetic justice, making fun of a guy who is still in the Japanese video game industry to this day and is quite a well-known name. Go look it up. Just go look it up. You don't need me to tell you the names. But even then, there are people to this day, especially very big names like Naoki Yoshida, Yoshi P as everyone knows him, talking about how the term JRPG damaged developers' their aspirations, their drive. It made them feel worse, and rightly so. So the reason we use the term console-style RPG has to do with the gameplay type and loop it grew out of. Now, this goes all the way back to very, very old games that some of you may have never played, such as the original Dragon Quest or even Ultima and Wizardry, because Ultima and Wizardry are eventually what inspired the console-style RPGs such as Dragon Quest, such as Final Fantasy.
Yeah.
The PC-style RPG you're all probably pretty aware of is that singular hero that you design up and you got a lot of leeway working with. At least that's, again, where the roots came from. Whereas the console-style RPG is a more streamlined experience of that in most cases. You may have a choice of what the character can do, but not who they are. Such as in Final Fantasy, you get to choose their classes, but they don't really have any personalities until later renditions of that game.
Mm-hmm.
Or in Final Fantasy II, they have their own personality backgrounds, and the most you do is develop whatever skills they have. Or in Dragon Quest, where they level up in a very fun format, I say with some hesitancy and slight sarcasm. But the gameplay loop that tended to arise out of these early console-style RPGs was you start in an area that you are preparing and gearing up for the next leg of your adventure. We call this the town phase. It doesn't always necessarily have to be a town, but it usually was a town back in those. After you get all your gear and all the things that you need to gear up for that leg of your journey, you explore outward into the world. We call this the field phase. This is where you're going to get your random encounters, you're going to level up new skills, maybe find some things on the world map, though usually those are saved for the last phase, the dungeon phase, which is the phase where you're in a place that is testing all your new skills, your new acquisitions, rewarding you for your exploration and your gameplay. You beat a boss that is kind of the culmination of what you've earned and found in that leg of your journey. And then as you come out of the dungeon, there's your next town phase, where you find the next preparation area, you know. And this was a very, very tight gameplay loop that had to exist at the time due to hardware limitations. Now, in today's day and age, that's not always going to be an issue anymore. But there are still people who follow this tight loop because it's the type of game they want to design, and it's very nice that they do. But that is what makes a console-style RPG. You have this more focused experience. Even if it's a very broad experience, it's a focused experience. For example, let's compare a more modern, very ubiquitous PC style RPG, Skyrim, to a more modern console style RPG, Tales of Arise. Tales of Arise is a gigantic fucking game. Over 100 hours if you're going to 100% that shit. But it's still a more focused experience. You have a chance to explore widely once you get past certain stages of the game. You get very wide, expansive exploration. But each of those places you explore is a focused experience. Whereas in Skyrim, you have a very wide exploration. Not everything is focused. Some is quite shallow. Some are quite deep. It's a difference of intent. Even in today's day and age where people are like, oh, everything's becoming world, et cetera, whatever it might be. Again, that goes more towards performative cynicism.
Mm-hmm.
But there is always a difference of intent and thus a difference of experience because of it. And so console-style RPG, while it started with the limitations of console hardware limiting how a game could be made, it became a medium style all its own. It's not even a genre, it's a medium style. Just like anime is not a genre, it's a medium.
Yeah. Or animation as a genre. Which was something I remember seeing from certain professors that I may have said a few things I probably shouldn't have towards them.
You bad-mouthing your professors? Heaven forbid, monk.
Mm-hmm. Oh.
Heaven forbid.
I mean, I made some progress. The fight didn't start that way. Unless they were
Heaven forbid.
Unless they were on a skating rink, in which case you signed up for this.
I would also like to say that hardware limitations is how some of the best franchises came to be. Like Metal Gear.
Absolutely. You are 100% correct, Maki.
I still find it amusing that there was a perfectly logical reason why Metal Gear Solid used a FAMAS as its primary rifle weapon. Huh. I know that they did this whole side story about a bunch of FAMASs being imported to Alaska, but the reality was it had a blocky design and that would be easier to animate.
Yep.
Which is, otherwise you have the awkward question is, why is a rogue branch of U.S. Special Forces using a French rifle?
Because the French are funding the American Revolution 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Oh.
I didn't make the rules.
Yeah. I wonder if that's also the reason the P90 got used so much in MGS4, but that's another story. Then again, the P90 is this weird miracle. It isn't fully the G11. It is not Kraut space magic, but it's not far off.
I mean, it's been back in the news recently, Monk. Did you see? For women holding it backwards on accident to pose for pictures.
Yeah, I saw that, and some artists decided to run with it and make
the 09P.
Yes, 09Ps. Which I can't even hate, given all of the bullpup memes you and I suffered through.
Stop. Stop. No more.
As well as the mag that has written on it, "You are reading a magazine."
I will never forgive. I will never forgive that.
Yeah.
I know I'm reading a magazine. I know what a magazine is. These are mags, not clips.
Yeah. But the point, and even with that, by the time we've gotten at least a year's worth of episodes into this, there's going to be a lot that we'll have covered with Sword World, and I will admit that I am going to have to look at at how certain things are going to get covered, like the replays and like, since those I would like to cover, but I'm not going to do a whole thing of us doing a dramatic reading of all the different voices, because we don't have enough people for that.
Monk, you and I still haven't done our dramatic reading of of the review.
Oh, right. The only reason I keep putting that off is because I'm afraid of what's going to happen to me after I do it.
You're afraid you don't have enough alcohol for this shit?
Yes. I read through that book once already, and I ended up causing an alcohol shortage for a week.
I mean, that RPG Net review is basically a book, all things considered.
But when it comes to some of the things within Sword World, the side stuff that still uses the 2d6 system, that we will not be covering because that's not Sword World. That also means the Goblin Slayer game won't be covered, at least not in this format.
Nor will that also means nor will the Konosuba, which a lot of people seem to associate with it.
Yeah, unless you're one of Kanakawa's Twitter accounts where you think that was the first Japanese tabletop to get translated.
Made the RPG would like a word with you.
Mm-hmm. Though there are some replays that I do think deserve some attention that we may end up giving when we start deep diving on individual books. One particular is the Devil May Care Adventurers trilogy, also known as Thieves' Rhapsody.
Completely fine.
And a big reason I bring up that trilogy is that was kind of the origin story for Sword World, even if people at the time didn't realize it.
True.
Like, because it was through the Thieves' Rhapsody replay that people got their first introduction to Sword World when it was in Dragon Magazine.
Mm-hmm.
And again, there's also some interesting replays that I know I'd want to cover, like say Fairy Force, which is dear God, Fairy Force.
Yeah.
I think the best way for me to describe Fairy Force is trying to do Precure with Sword World.
And it surprisingly worked.
It surprisingly works, which is why I'm busting out laughing. Or things like Rock and Roll, ROLE, which is all about having an adventuring party acting like a touring band.
It will always work if you try hard enough. It's the principle behind like half of Japanese media.
Yeah, that was what I was hinting at earlier when I brought up the way genre is treated. And honestly, that approach I prefer, because I've always felt stifled by the design by gospel thinking when it comes to how people treat genre. Of if you're doing a fantasy, you have to do these certain things. I've ranted at this with Zan. I've ranted at this many times on this channel, but I've always resented this idea that if I'm doing high fantasy, that I have to be drawing from Tolkien or Howard. I got myself in a lot of trouble once upon a time for writing out a setting that was drawing more upon The Legend of Zelda at the time. And eventually I think we will visit Record of Lodoss War, because as extensive as the OVA and the anime series are, those are only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to that universe. There's two whole, like, the 26 episode anime Chronicles of the Heroic Knight only covers one book. The OVA only covers one book, and it's not even the first book. And The Legend of Crystania has very little to only covers one book, because there's a lot of material with Legend of Crystania.
Outside of the actual RPG replay, there are 7 novels and 2 side story novels.
Mm-hmm.
Also, the reason anyone should watch the OVA is it's Madhouse.
Yeah. There was also a bit of cross-adaptation, because fan favorite Piratus was not in the novels originally.
Yep.
But Mizuno liked her, so he put her in.
Yeah. There's also a bunch of like additionals, more novels that were written, side novels like Legend of Lodoss and Deedlet's Tale.
And the Black Knight.
Yep.
Yeah, there's a lot. There are at least 3 whole arcs when it comes to Lodoss. There's Legend of Lodoss, which is a prequel. There is Record of Lodoss War, which only a couple books have been covered out of, I think, 7. And then there was Next Generation.
There's a bunch of stuff. So Lodoss itself, by itself, is just gigantic. Now think about all the things. Oh, that's the last, like, I know we mentioned it earlier, but we forgot to mention why it was relevant. About how one of the reasons D&D failed in Japan was it didn't give a lot of support and additionals in the years between edition releases and such.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why this is so pertinent with Sword World, because they're releasing like a new book every 3 fucking months.
Yeah, they tend to alternate between replays and supplements. For a while, it was
Replay, supplements, and world guides.
Yep. Supplements are usually mechanic-facing things. These would be things like Arcane Relic or Battle Master. Battle Master
Or
was
Outlaw.
Great. Yeah, or the Outlaw
Outlaw
Profile.
was a world
book.
guide. Yeah.
Outlaw Profile book was both.
Yeah, it was both a world guide and a mechanics book, a supplement. But they release these various materials that are either new and additional mechanics for funsies or expansions upon mold mechanics, guidebooks to an entire section of the world. That's why they are called world guide.
Yep.
Or the replays, which are basically like, you can play this if you want to, or you can just kind of use it as a framework and play your own thing inside it if you really want to.
Mm-hmm.
And this has been going on for literally a decade or more.
Yeah.
They're just like, 3 months, here's the new world guide. 6 months, here's the new supplements. Oh, here are some of the replays in between all that, because the replays are basically just games that they're adapting to books.
Yeah, a lot of them are the brainchild of Beth Yuli Kurosaki, who I would love to have a conversation with at some point.
Yes.
And
Yes.
ask him why he keeps walking around with a Dragonborn helmet.
I don't think we need to ask that question, Monk. I think it's self-evident, don't you think?
I suppose it's in the same vein as why Nabeshin dresses like Lupin.
Well, now it's not dressing like Lupin anymore. It's dressing like himself from Excel Saga. Or the fact that Yoko Taro always wears the Emil helmet.
Wears the Emil helmet and has a special compartment for snacks in case he gets hungry.
Yes, because Yoko Taro is a fucking genius.
But the point is that there's quite a bit, and I looked up what we've got. So there are Legend of Lodos, which has not had any adaptations, has 7 novels.
Yep.
Record of Lodos War also has 7, though 2 of them are 2-parters, as well as 2 side novels, Deedlet's Tale and The Black Knight.
Yep.
Next Generation has 8 novels.
Yep.
There is also
Lodos.
one further at anniversary one called The Crown of the Covenant. And Cristania has 17 novels.
Let's just say that when it comes to Aelcrast, and more specifically these smaller areas that are not part of that are not the entirety of Aelcrast, the place is goddamn huge and has a lot of stories in it.
Yeah. And when it comes to Rune Soldier, there's about 18 novels that have been fan translated.
Yep.
From 3 different series: the original Louis the Rune Soldier, then In the Kingdom of, and then the Sword of Farlam series.
Yep. Which are all just collectively called Rune Soldier by the fandom.
Yeah.
But the point.
Oh,
Go
sorry.
ahead. Go ahead, Monku.
Yeah. There have been a few that have jumped over to manga, but there's more novels than there are manga.
Yeah. And I think the big point here, though, is that these worlds have inspired so much creativity, not just in the game space, but outside of it, too. That there is... If we wanted to deep dive all of Sword World, it'd take us years. And we'd be playing catch-up constantly.
And that's even if we weren't doing this in a bi-weekly format.
Yes.
But with that said, I think we covered everything for this introduction. We did go into a bit of tangents, but welcome to the show. That's what we do.
Anyone who hasn't been to any of our other podcasts, this is par for the norm.
Yeah. And
The fact that we're managing to keep this below 2 hours is a miracle in and of itself.
But we will be back at this in 2 weeks, going over the history of Sword World from the earliest days of the early replays all the way up to modern times. And even in the interim days, there's plenty of stuff that's going to be happening. Not all of it is tied to Sword World, but a lot of it will be tied to tabletop, as well as helping support people who are making their own games, whether it be giving them critique, giving them a platform, or both. And I'm not going to say that I am some massive expert whose word means that you'll be instantly guaranteed success, but the more successful people are the ones who listen. But we will be back here next week for the next part of a project I'm also doing on Sundays called Fated Continuum, which is Zan and I's attempt to take each of the mainline Final Fantasies and eventually the spin-offs and adapt them into my setting. Not into my setting, into Legend Edition.
Our game, yeah.
Yeah. Eventually, I'm gonna have to set up a bot to post the link for that every few minutes, but that hasn't happened yet. It'll happen eventually, just not yet. But
well, Monk.
With that said,
I would like to say.
Good.
I would like to say, Monk, that I have an outro line for us for these particular episodes. If you want me to.
Oh, go right ahead, because I don't feel like using my usual one.
All right. Well, everybody, that concludes this foray into these Sword-Forged worlds. We hope your adventures are numerous and grand, and your treasures myriad.
Stay frosty, everybody.
Oh